Intolerable Acts and the First Continental Congress. The British government was furious about the Boston Tea Party and responded by enacting a set of laws to punish the Americans and limit their freedoms. The British hoped that the other colonies would isolate Boston and that this would prevent the colonists from unifying against British rule. These laws were officially called the Coercive Acts, but were nicknamed the Intolerable Acts by the colonists. The Intolerable Acts included a law that closed the port of Boston until all damages from the Boston Tea Party were paid. They also included a law that limited Democratic town meetings in Massachusetts, a law that allowed British officials charged with a major crime to be transferred from American courts to British courts, and the Quartering Act, a law that required Americans to provide food and housing to British soldiers. The punishment of Boston by Parliament did not go unnoticed by the other colonies. Instead of isolating Boston as Parliament had hoped, the Intolerable Acts did just the opposite. The colonies began to unite. The other colonists began to realize that if it could happen to Boston, it could happen to them too. Other colonies began to send goods to Boston while the port was closed. More people began to join resistance groups like the Sons of Liberty. As a direct result of the Intolerable Acts, 12 of the 13 colonies decided to send representatives to a meeting to discuss creating a unified resistance to the King and Parliament. This meeting was called the First Continental Congress. It took place in Philadelphia on September 5, 1774. The delegates to the Congress included future presidents George Washington and John Adams. The goal of the Congress was to organize the colony's response to the Intolerable Acts. The delegates wanted to come up with a plan of action, but they were divided on what the best plan would be. Some delegates wanted to make a more peaceful protest, while others wanted to take bolder steps, which some feared would lead to war. In the end, the delegates decided to write a Declaration of Rights. Among the rights included in the Declaration were life, liberty, property, and the right to create their own taxes within the colonies. The document also provided an outline of the reasons for the colony's rebellion against the king, including the Intolerable Acts and the idea of taxation without representation. It stressed that the colonies were still loyal to Britain, but they disagreed with Parliament's right to tax them. The final draft of the document was approved by the delegates on October 14, 1774, and was sent to King George. The Congress also passed the Articles of Association, which called on the colonies to stop importing British goods on December 1, 1774, if Parliament refused to repeal the Coercive Acts. Before disbanding the Congress on October 26, 1774, the delegates decided to reconvene, or meet again, in early May 1775, if the British government did not respond to their petition. The Continental Congress never got a response from Britain, and the stage was set for war. Ready to answer a few questions about the First Continental Congress? Question 1. The Coercive Acts were given what nickname by the colonists? A. Intolerable Acts. B. Horrid Acts. C. Tax Acts. D. Punishment Acts. If you answered A, you know that the colonists called the Coercive Acts the Intolerable Acts. Question 2. In what city was the First Continental Congress held? A. Hartford. B. Boston. C. Philadelphia. D. New York. If you answered C, you know that the First Continental Congress was held in Philadelphia. Question 3. Who was not a delegate to the First Continental Congress? A. George Washington. B. John Adams. C. Alexander Hamilton. D. A and B. The correct answer is C. Alexander Hamilton was not a delegate to the First Continental Congress. Thinking question. In what ways can citizens make their voices heard in today's United States government?